that we incurred during the January and February storms. Still talking about response, alerting and notifications, situational awareness. I talked about how they fulfill one of the 4 functions in an emergency operations center. Public information is an ongoing labor-intensive role, not only during EOC activations, but when the EOC is not activated as well. And the social media aspect of this really has changed the whole landscape of managing public information. We made great strides in this area from a county perspective with our Super Bowl Joint Information Center that Sunnyvale actually hosted for us. Resource management can become very complex in the Emergency Operations Center environment. We do have a city emergency resource directory that our logistics staff use in the EOC. It was updated last February. It's in the process of being updated again. But we also work really quite diligently between the various sections in the EOC. Logistics actually obtains the resources that are needed. Operations normally requests those resources, and then our plans section actually tracks those resources using a county tool called Web EOC. I included this slide. I don't know if this looks familiar to you. This happens to be the Rancho Shopping Center on El Camino. We had a 5-alarm fire there in May. We obtained, after this fire, the first ever economic disaster declaration for the city of Santa Clara. In order to get an economic disaster declaration, and it's the United States Small Business Administration that declares this, there has to be at least 5 businesses that have documented uninsured damages. This was the second such declaration in the county that anyone can remember, but this is something we would want to continue to provide for the community if such a need arises. This enabled the businesses there to apply for low-interest loans. This is the organization chart for the City Emergency Operations Center. And I'm going to take a look around. Yes, everyone who is present today, the city leaders who are present today, are represented on this organizational chart. From a high level, I'll just quickly say the management section there in white, EOC director, and the boxes in white will set strategy or policy for the emergency response. The operations section, and if you look under the boxes there in the operations section, you'll see a lot of our city leaders represented there. They identify most of the time what resource needs are. The plan section, moving over, the plan section is responsible for planning, and they track the resources that are needed. They input into our situational awareness tools, whatever our current situation might be. Our logistics section actually obtains the resources that we need. Our finance section works closely with logistics to be sure our procurement policies are being followed. For future actions, I have ARES RACES as the first bullet there. Those are our ham radio operators, and that stands for Amateur Radio Emergency Services, ARES, and then RACES is Radio Amateur Civil Emergency Service in Santa Clara. That is one team. This is a very, very important resource because in times of catastrophic emergency, sometimes our ham radio operators can be the only means of communication. This was the case in Nepal for the 2015 earthquake there. The photo of the gentleman holding a radio in the bottom left-hand corner of the screen is Dr. Sanjeep Pandey. We hosted at our fire training center last June a regional outreach to all ham radio operators in the region where Dr. Pandey came and thanked our local ARES RACES team and others in the ham radio community for supporting his operations in Nepal. He really provided, through radio operations, the only means of responding, communicating there in 2015. We have a lot of work to do with our Aries Races team right now. Their event coordinator stepped down from that role, so we did not have their support for our recent Easter egg hunt as we have had in the past. We are working internally to see how we can bring that team forward, but it's very important that we do continue to have a robust capability with this group of volunteers. Very important to our communications capability in providing redundant communications. Other future actions. We must continue our EOC training. I would say many of our EOC staff right now have awareness level training. There are more training needs that we will be meeting as we go forward. We will continue to develop the EOC to modernize it more fully. The next plan we are working on, and this has been a goal of Chief Kelly's for some time, is a crisis communications plan. We need to have pre-scripted messages for a variety of scenarios in various languages at our fingertips that could easily be tailored in responding to an emergency. Exercises are just critical. I'd like to say we train as we fight. We must train, drill, exercise on an ongoing basis. Success really is not final when it comes to emergency management in any way. And a message for our community, and we've been, I think, very good at getting this message out, but we can't emphasize enough, we'd like the community to register for Alert SCC so they would receive notices. It's our police department that issues those notices for our city. And we have emergency preparedness guidelines on our website, fire.santaclaraca.gov. And again, Alert SCC is alertscc.com. And then our emergency preparedness guidelines, fire.santaclaraca.gov. I've actually given permission for other jurisdictions in the state to use some of our guidelines that we have on our website. They're appreciated. And that concludes my update for you today.
Thank you. That was an incredible presentation. I know I have some questions if any of the council members have questions as well. Maybe I'll just start with a couple of my questions. You had mentioned that we had 8 shelters in Santa Clara, and you mentioned 3 of them being public facilities, the community center, the YAC, and the senior center.
Yes.
And what types of facilities are those other 5 facilities in the city? And I think you had mentioned a certain number that collectively they could hold.
Right.
So
the other facilities are faith-based or schools.
Okay. And then could you explain the difference between evacuate versus shelter?
Yes.
And how we would be able to accommodate the evacuees and then the shelter, I guess overnight shelter.
Yes, thank you for that question. An evacuation center is a first point for people to respond to. An evacuation center would not immediately have cots for everyone who might need to locate there temporarily. So it's designed for people to just respond to if they need to get out of an area immediately. If there's an imminent threat, it's a place for them to go, but not necessarily to spend the night. So I would say comfortable overnight accommodations would be a distinction between an evacuation center and a shelter.
Okay, so the shelters, then we have the 8 shelters in the city, and how many evacuation centers do we have, or are they both?
Thank you. I don't believe I was clear with that. They're all considered evacuation centers as well.
Okay.
Yeah, they're all evacuation centers as well.
Okay, and then one thing you mentioned is that, of course, it's all on our mind because of what happened in San Jose and the unfortunate situation that nobody apparently was super prepared for, but you talked about monitoring the Calabasas Creek during all these heavy rains and things like that. So you said something about our city staff and our emergency services were monitoring those even before the water district. Is that sort of, were you doing it at the same time, or?
I would say it was at the same time. Yeah, the water district is continuously monitoring all of these things, continuously monitoring water levels. and they've been a very good partner to us. I placed a phone call to them when I got a call about the concern at Calabasas, and they got back to me immediately with the information they had, Ray Fields in particular. But we've had excellent response from them. But they provide one piece, one part of the information from their perspective, how quickly the water will rise. Our eyes on the creeks, our boots on the ground, our feet on the street are just monitoring also as the creeks are rising, but is there any debris that the water district might not know about that we can see with our eyes? That's
So you're
all
very
part of it.
proactive in terms of being out there and
I'm
trying to
confident,
identify
yes.
the potential risks and that.
Yes, I was very pleased with the performance of our city staff, many of whom are here today. So I can tell you with confidence going forward for a storm scenario that we would continue to be proactive in this.
Okay, great.
Yeah,
And-
if I may add to
Yes,
that
yes.
answer, just again using San Jose's example, the water district will tell you we are releasing so much water from the dam or wherever it's coming from, but that doesn't mean that at any given location the creek has that capacity, because there's a theoretical capacity, but there could be siltation over the years, and it depends on maintenance, vegetation, which means the water can rise much quicker. So one thing Lisa and I have talked about for our people on the ground to observe, because you can't really tell how fast the water is rising. So we're talking about marking the piers under the bridges. If you have marks, with 10 feet, 15 feet, or whatever, that's easier to see how fast it's rising. So we are looking at painting those kind of things to make it easier for our inspectors and other people in the field.
Thank you. And I know that, water's not our only potential disaster that you're working with, but when you talk about public information, there's many seniors and even non-English speaking people that are not on social media, and I know you talked about, knocking on doors and things like that, but is there any particular outreach to seniors or those that might be isolated or alone, how do we get them the information, or in an emergency contacting them besides someone knocking on their door? Is there other methods that we can use to work with them?
That's an excellent question, thank you. We can certainly discuss this topic further within the city, and it's possible our senior center may already be giving emergency preparedness information out from that location. I can't say that with certainty, but that's something we could certainly look into and get back to you on to see
Right,
what
because of
more
the
can be done.
The feeling of isolation and being scared, in the event of an emergency, we want to make sure they're connected somehow in the city that we're able to get them. Thank you. Councilmember O'Neill?
Thank you. So a couple of my questions, like you mentioned, and you showed the org chart and mentioned, a lot of our staff that's in the room. One of the concerns I know that we've had just in general with our employees, and I know, the fact that so many of our employees live at a fairly good distance from Santa Clara. So what kind of thoughts have you had about what do we do in the instance that in the middle of the night there's a big earthquake or something like that, and most of the staff may, they could be in the Central Valley or over in Aptos or whatever, in terms of, coordinating our response?
I've had many, many thoughts about that. Thank you. The org chart that you've seen does not represent all of the city staff who have been trained in basic emergency operations center operations. We have a goal to have at least 3 full teams that can work in the EOC to provide 24-hour operations. The state has a program entitled the Emergency Management Assistance Program, EMA program, that gives us the ability, as we are requesting resources, to bring in emergency service personnel from other parts of the region and the state to assist us in the Emergency Operations Center. But we also have some what I call just-in-time tools that I developed over the past year to assist city staff that we might need to pull from other parts of the city who have not yet been trained in the EOC who live nearby could perhaps come and fulfill certain roles following these just-in-time training tools. And we have checklists for every position in the EOC, so it's really step by step. You arrive at the EOC, these are the things that you need to do. All considered just-in-time training aids, but this is a very common issue. We have ongoing discussions about this. Mr. Batra and I discussed this at length, and it's just something we need to continue to work on.
So it's like we've got to have not just, it's, like you said, it's almost like if it's kind of like the cascade down, like who's available to, somebody may end up being an incident commander who never dreamed that they would be doing that. So, so do we, in addition to what I understand, kind of like the checklist of what to do, but are we doing training with our employees to have them fulfill various roles in the event that they have to step into a situation that they maybe didn't require or didn't think that their position would require them to do?
Yes, we have been doing that, and we will continue to do that. One of the reasons I've developed some just-in-time tools is because in my previous role at the state, I had more experience than I cared to have in training people just in time when something happened, and we had to respond. So yes, it's a very important issue. It's a very important issue.
So I also noticed that you had on there the CERT team, and I know that we've called it different things over the years, and many years ago I took that training. But it was with a group. It wasn't like my immediate neighbors. It was kind of a group from, more of a diverse group from across Santa Clara. And I know for like 20 years for my employer, I was part of the medical and emergency response on a couple of different sites but we, so my question is, with those folks, how much like ongoing training or drilling, because I know because I remember being told by fire and EMS personnel that they said, if anything happens, this is the last place we're coming because we know you guys are better prepared and you train together and you do all this stuff. So I know how important it is to kind of build up that teamwork in addressing when there is an emergency. So what are we looking at? Because I think in this situation, we're really going to, if there were to be a big earthquake, let's say a situation like what happened in Japan a few years ago, we would really need our residents to step up and to help and to kind of know what to do. So what are your thoughts kind of with the residents' role?
The residents play a significant role. The second bullet on my first future action slide listed the CERT program. Mm-hmm. Currently, we have a train and release CERT program. We do not have organized teams in neighborhoods that train, drill, exercise on an ongoing basis. We do an annual county-wide CERT exercise, if you will. There's a couple pictures from the one we did in October. We held it at Moffett Field in 2016. I see that as a need going forward. Currently, we have an email list of about 600, just over 600 names of people who've gone through our train and release, CERT program. As we go forward, if we're able to build the emergency services program, it certainly is a goal to have the ability to organize teams. I think it's important. I agree.
Okay, so one last kind of thought that I had. I know because, once again, thinking about back in my, when I was a member of a response team for my employer, we were on the flight path for Moffett. And so one of our drills was, what if something happened and actually the plane hit our location? So when I tell people and I think about, when I talk about San Jose Airport, I said 90% of the time is when that plane takes off, immediately it's out over the city of Santa Clara. And depending if the wind is shifting, they're landing. So do we continue to do work with, like, say, the airport, because that, to me, if I think about a potential disaster, if something were to happen, like on a takeoff, that plane is going to go right into Santa Clara neighborhoods. So what kind of planning do we do for something like, what we would do in that situation?
Yes, there was just an exercise in March that the airport put on, and we were invited to participate in that. We had members of our fire department command staff participate in that airport exercise, San Jose Airport. There's also lessons to be learned, for example, the Asiana plane crash, 2013, San Francisco. We learned lessons from both exercises and real-world emergencies.
Okay, so that is an ongoing.
That is an identified scenario that
Risk
we
area.
need to pay attention to and prepare for, yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. That's all I had.
Well, the 7 of us live in Santa Clara, so we should take your just-in-time training program, because we're here, right? Anyways, Councilmember Davis.
Mine was just about the schools, because we have Santa Clara University, we have Mission College, and then we have all these schools. So how are you working with that, or is that part of this org chart? Is there someone in charge of that?
Yes, well, in fact, there wasn't time for me to share so many things with you, but just recently we were able to obtain, through grant funds, school radios for all 42 of our schools, including the private schools in Santa Clara. And our police department, we were able to distribute those in partnership with Sergeant Frazier from our police department, who's the police liaison with our schools. That's an area that I would say we're in beginning stages of working with. But I expect that we would have a school representative in the EOC as well as a liaison if we had schools significantly affected by a scenario and the EOC was activated. University, we have, really an excellent relationship with all of our local partners. The university is one. Just met with them again very recently. We're going to be putting on a CERT program for them as well. And we had a representative from the university in the Emergency Operations Center for the Saturday Super Celebration that was held there. And in our EOC, we had camera access to all of the cameras on campus for that event. So continue to, as I shared, positive relationships with all of our partners is really critical, and I really enjoy that. We're in a good place with that.
I didn't see it in the org chart, that's why I asked you, because there's something, Teresa's scenario of a plane crash, but mine is more of an earthquake, the reality of an
Sure.
earthquake in California. And
Sure, absolutely.
and when you were talking multilingual people, you're talking huge amounts of these kids in these schools that just don't understand, and they're going to be looking for their parents, and it's going to
Yes.
be a mess. But anyway, if they could shelter in place, or however, I guess you had this evacuation plan. But I just wanted to know that you were working with them, because you're talking of massive amounts of children during the course of the day. So,
Yes, the EOC org chart that you saw was the basic
Basic org
organizational
chart,
chart.
okay.
Under, where Chief Kelly and I are listed, it says EOC coordinator / liaison. Typically, that's two different roles in an EOC or a small municipality. Agency representatives from places like Santa Clara University, the school district, would fall under that section in the org chart. So there's other positions that there wasn't time to get into today.
okay. Well, thank you.
But thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Mahan?
Thank you. You mentioned radios, and it triggered a memory for me. Was the interoperability of the radio communications system countywide ever resolved?
The interoperability of the
So that
radio
all the different
communication system in the
agencies
county
Can
resolved.
communicate on the same radio bandwidth?
Yeah, I believe that issue was before my time, and I would expect that, Chief Madden could speak to that in greater detail.
I think I see him nodding.
Yeah,
Yes,
the
that means
700
yes.
megahertz has
So
been.
everyone can talk to
addressed.
everyone else.
Yes, it's going to be probably about another year for everybody.
Oh,
Roll it out in South County.
oh, okay.
All the agencies are going to.
So work has progressed, and, yeah, okay. But that's good. But it's still not quite there, but will be soon. And my other question is, social media is great. Is there some way that the public, in receiving or going on social media to get information, will know absolutely verifiably that it's coming from the city, from an official source, and not, from some fake news source or something else?
Well, that's an excellent question, and it's a very current question. Thank you. The whole topic of cybersecurity is a significant threat right now in the nation and internationally. So I don't know if I could credibly address that. don't know if I could credibly address that, other than it's an ongoing issue. I know Gaurav Garg, our IT director, and I have discussed this, in the past. We discuss it on an ongoing basis within the fire department. It's something that requires continued vigilance. It's not something that we can ever accept is sufficiently addressed. It's just an ongoing challenge.
Thank you, I appreciate your honesty. Is there some way, like, if someone did go on Facebook, do we have a source that they can then verify for themselves, like a number to call if they get if you put something out on Facebook or social media that says, there's flooding in this area, avoid it, or whatever it might be, and someone wanted to verify it for themselves, would there be a number included that they can call and verify, or some other means?
Yeah, those messages do provide follow-up information or how to obtain more information.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Watanabe?
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you for the report, Lisa. I really appreciate it. I know during the recent storms, the north side was very concerned. As the city manager knows, I reached out to him several times to just get an update on the creeks, and because people were reaching out to me, so I'm sure it was with your work and vigilance that he was able to obtain a lot of that information. So it really helped a lot. There was one thing I learned was that there's a camera on one of the creeks, the Santa Masaquino Creek, and that was actually very helpful. But it's just one camera. Do you know if the city has ever contemplated putting additional cameras on other creeks just so people can keep an eye out? Because I think having that visual really helped a lot of people seeing how the water was rising or receding.
I can share that I have not participated in a conversation on adding additional cameras on our creeks. I have not participated in a conversation on that topic.
Councilmember Watanabe, that's a great suggestion. We have not, thought of installing those from this perspective. I mean, those are for other reasons, the creek trail and, just to monitor other activities, but that's a good suggestion. We should look into that.
Yeah, like I said, it was a good visual, and people, who were just stuck in their homes, just being able to keep an eye on that water, it was, I know it was very helpful to a lot of people. You mentioned the yellow location on the shelter map. You mentioned that it's in the north side. Can you say where exactly that is? Or
I can't at this
contemplated?
time. It's a private entity that I have met with once, emailed quite a bit with, and have a second follow-up meeting with the Red Cross and the private entity. But I am not able to speak publicly at this time.
Okay, no worries.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Councilmember Mahan, do you have additional questions? Okay. Thank you very much. I'm going to ask if there's any member of the public would like to speak. There might be additional questions if you don't mind. Would any member of the public like to speak? Please come forward. If not, thank you very much for this report. It's going to be an ongoing conversation for us. There's a lot to talk about, and I even know there's neighborhoods that want to organize, so I would like to pursue that as well in terms of the future. City Manager, do you have any closing comments? All right, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it. So next, we have a closed session. Going to call the closed session to order. City Clerk, confirmation of a quorum.
Mayor Gilmore confirming a quorum.
So we have 6 items on closed session. Is there any public, Councilmember, Vice Mayor Caserta?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just want to let you know that I will be abstaining on closed session matter F because it's within 500 feet of my residency.
Okay, thank you very much for that.
And I have the same abstention, thank you.
Okay, 2 abstentions on F. We may not even get to that until after the meeting, so we'll see. Any member of the public would like to speak on any item in closed session? All right, seeing none, we are going to recess to closed session. Thank you.